I
Bacon
only have
dress.
like 3 or 4 meetings tomorrow, so it's a light
Isn't
day.
it no meeting Friday?
Yeah, that's why I only have 3 or 4 meetings.
Oh dear.
Aside from the ones that will inevitably get scheduled tomorrow because somebody will panic because people have enough time to think on Fridays and then they think about things that they need to schedule meetings with me immediately. So, yeah.
Oh, man, I did the thing again. One day I'll remember to update Audacity in between shows.
Oh yeah, no, I forgot to. And I'm probably gonna have to, grit my teeth and upgrade to Windows 11 at some point.
Why?
Well, for one thing, I want that setting that keeps the windows on the screen where they were because I often have to switch over to just one screen during the day when I use my middle monitor for my work computer. So then I have to
Do you
shove
physically move
everything
a
over there.
cable or just press the button?
No, I have USB. I have a USB hub. Not a
But
USB hub. I
so
have a switcher.
so that's
But
if you
if I don't do that because my main monitor's in the middle, so I have to if I don't change my main monitor, and I can't deal with my main monitor being on the left, it drives me nuts. So like, if I don't do that, then like everything opens on the screen that is not currently active.
yeah, you can either get a switcher that saves EDID or you can get like my wife does that. She just has two separate cables and does it on two different inputs so it never actually disconnects.
Yeah.
Because the switcher
Well,
is what's
no, it doesn't
disconnecting
disconnect. It's not that it disconnects. It's that the main monitor is the one in the middle. So I open up a window on the other PC
Oh,
when
okay.
it's not the main, and then it opens it up into the void, and then I have to like shift Windows left to move it over.
Mm.
Oh,
These are the firstest of first world problems. I grant you.
Yeah. No, it's I forgot about like it actually being on. Because then
Yeah.
like you can so disconnecting it would actually be better for you. Because
Well,
then
not
all the
really.
monitors would if you
Well, that's
disconnect
what I
it from
do,
the
right? Is I set
yeah.
it to show only on 2, and then everything goes over to the left. But then when I go to the right, like every window that I've ever opened since the beginning of time goes onto my main monitor where I don't
Yep.
want it.
There's a power toy called Fancy Zones where you can set
Yeah,
predefined slots, and so like
I should probably look at that.
I use something basically the same that I always just plop things into places, and I have different settings for like when I'm podcasting. I have a bar for Twitch chat on my center monitor, and OBS
Yeah.
goes over here, and it's helpful.
Yeah, I should try that anyway.
It's worth it. Yeah, I
This
mean
is a
there are a
spicy
bunch of
break.
there are a bunch of unholy DKs that are good, but it seems like the theory
Yeah, Tsuna's
like
list is yeah.
it's the best performer right now, or at least one of them. Okay, I think I have everything. Largely a lighter news week. I finished editing Angry Chicken stuff, so that's live. We can send people that way. Did either of you listen to that? I mean, Steve, you were there.
I was there, yeah.
Yeah, it was no device.
Okay.
I'll listen to it. Like after you broadcast, I was doing coachings while I was live, but then
You read it back.
I watched it before bed, and then I played it again while I was painting today.
What I'll probably do is pitch to YouTube because my experience is going to be a little different because, I was doing the show, but
Yeah, but
little different.
yeah, you kind of were, and I mean, even if you were listening, you were also thinking about what you were going to ask next and stuff like that too. So
Yeah, well, we had a pretty clear outline that we discussed before just to make sure we hit all the points because it was a pretty dense episode.
yeah.
All right. We can talk about that here on this podcast.
Yeah, we can. I mean, I like I said to Edel in her stream today, I'm happy to have an episode where I'm not planning to consider starting to drink at the end of it. So
Yeah, I don't think we have any. I'm not gonna finish
There's
that
very
sentence.
little
No. Something will happen
gremlins are
mid-show.
listening.
Don't put that into the universe. Just don't
Nope.
do it.
Everyone watching this will be like, "Who hurt you all?"
Too many companies are talking about, efficiency in their earnings reports, which means cuts. So
I mean,
Yeah, well.
most of those have already happened, but yes. All right. I'll have local recordings. Everyone has your local recordings up?
I haven't started it yet, but I have it open.
Recording.
Yep, I'm
Recording.
recording.
3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. Starting the show in 5, 4, 3, 2. Nope. Soundboard is not gonna do. I need to remember to restart my soundboard more regularly.
Also, you need to tweet, unless I just need to refresh.
I mean, it's getting to the
You
point where
do.
5, 4, 3, 2, nope is kind of the default countdown.
I
I
did
can't
tweet.
even use those as the end of the episode anymore. It's happened too many times.
All right.
You could use this though.
Starting the show for real this time. 5, 4, 3, 2.
Shadows hide you. I am listening. Our paths converge.
So good to see you.
Hail to you! Never lose hope.
Here for a chat.
I hear you. It has only begun. Fight on, friend!
Hello and welcome to episode 381 of Coin Conceit, a Hearthstone podcast dedicated to making the competitive side of the game more accessible to you. It is Thursday, February 2nd in the evening. From Gadgetzan, New York, it's me, Ridiculous Hat. From Nomergon, Ohio, we have Edelweiss.
Hello.
And from Northern Massachusetts, we have With Good.
Hi.
Hello to both of you. Hello to all of you out there listening. Hello to those of you in the Twitch chat watching live. Hello to our patrons. You're wonderful and great. And hello to everyone that left us reviews. Thank you so much for doing that. Really helps other people find the show. Life and Ladder. Steve, your ladder progression is the inspiration for Dexnation this week. So tell us about the Twilight Zone, as it were.
So, you know how I keep saying that this meta is going to turn me into an aggro player because of the quantity of BS that I was facing and the tilt that I was dealing with?
You did
Well,
say
it finally happened. It finally happened. So I had a decent run at, after the nerfs this past weekend. I just basically played Curse Imp Warlock all weekend. And I was starting at like 9,700. I ended at like 5,000. So I was able to repair my MMR a little bit. And then the month changed, and I saw that Baby Bear was posting what I thought was her list, but it's actually Atsuna's list of Unholy Death Knight. So I figured, it's the first day of the month. I should try a new deck, see what's there. At the very worst, I'll see what I'm playing against if I'm playing control decks. And yeah, so that was yesterday, which was the first. Today's the second. I'm at 10x multiplier. I'm at Diamond 1, 2 stars, with a 76.5% win rate over 51 games with Unholy Death Knight. The deck is very, very, very good.
Solid.
Yeah.
4 times as many wins as you would normally have.
I know, right? Like this. Like I don't even know if I'm gonna try to finish up after the show tonight and see if I can just get myself over the line.
Sorry, let me clarify. Not 4 times as many wins, 4 times as many games.
Yeah. No, like this is like my average game time is 6.6 minutes. Like I'm just getting started most of the time at 6.6 minutes. So, but yeah, I had a game. I was playing, like when I was first playing it yesterday, I was on the exercise bike. I usually play something on the exercise bike, and it's been Hearthstone the last couple days. Like depends on what is grabbing me. And this is before I've taken my ADHD meds, so I generally don't expect those sessions to be particularly productive. But I ran into a Ramp Druid, and I think they confused me because they played Lingering Zombie for some reason, and I didn't know why that was there. And so I thought maybe they were just like a weird, slow aggro deck or something. So I traded it off, which I shouldn't have, because I ended up getting them down to 1 life. And then they armored all the way back up to 31. So they had like, double Under King, and I think they just played a Nubricon just to get the armor out of it and just like everything they could do. I still won that game, by the way, because Lord Marrowgar is a house of a card.
Uh-huh.
And he big, and he brought his friends.
He's big, and his friends are angry. And generally, like, there are a lot of games, especially against slower decks, where it seems like all is lost, and then you play Marigar, and Marigar just bails you out of those games pretty hard. I mean, there's not a lot of ways without Devourer that Druid is going to deal with like a 17-17 rush. And that's just like one of the 7 minions that's on the board. So it's it's an interesting deck. It's not, I mean, we were talking about this before the show. It's not so much an aggro deck as it is like, it's more like old like token Druid from like the Kobolds and Catacombs days, kind of. But or maybe it's not Kobolds and Catacombs, maybe whatever was at the end of that following year.
Witchwood?
Yeah, I guess that was Rusticon's Rumble around that time when we had like the token Druid mirrors with Spreading Plague.
Yeah.
And it's kind of what it feels like, because like the like the Necromancer, Battlefield Necromancer, and whatever the 1/3 that makes 2 copies of itself. Like it feels like you're spreading plague sometimes. Yeah, the
Swarm Guard. Yeah.
Like you do feel like you're spreading plaguing sometimes, but it's definitely a different experience. I'm not used to being on this side of the matchup, but I can see the appeal. I don't know that this is somewhere I want to live, but it's a nice place to visit.
I mean, 77% win rate. Like, I would just, I personally would hang out there. I would do that.
Well, it's like Disneyland, right? Like, it's great when you're there, but like after a while, it gets boring and you need to go do something else.
We have different perspectives on Disneyland. But that's neither here nor there. I'm glad you're having success with it. Edel, how are you doing? It is your favorite time of the year, Heroic Brawliseum time, where you make poor financial decisions and tell our listeners not to do what you do on camera all day.
It's fine. I end up getting the mini set through packs. Doesn't matter that I spend all my gold. It's not really a concern.
You don't seem concerned. So tell us, how is that going? How is life in Brawliseum?
So I am doing fewer because, full-time job now. So far I have just done 3. I think I went 8 and then 10 and then 9. So, okay. The 10 I think could have been an 11. I just screwed up. It's Phylactery Warlock. It happens sometimes. I hadn't done the math before with an opposing Cariel in play, and I was mistaken about how much I was going to deal, so wouldn't make that mistake again. I might do another Phylactery run, but in general, I always enjoy like trying various things. I'll probably do a Frost Decay. I'll do a Blood Decay at some point. And yeah, it's going well enough so far that I think I should be able to get another 4 to 6 runs in, depending on how much gold I get. So yeah, I'm very, very pleased with that. And my first run I did with a deck that I brewed up that I've seen like variations of this that someone more renowned than myself must have played, but it's a Shadow Priest. Now, other people have some of the chunkier Death Rattle minions. Like I've seen running like Light Shower or the 5/5 that draws stuff, but mine was much lower to the ground with Shadowed Spirit and the Haunting one and the
Haunting Nightmare, yeah.
Budget Shadowed Spirit that only triggers if it's the
Brittleskin
opponent's
Zombie.
turn. Yeah, that one. I did initially have the 2-mana 5/5 as well, and I might put those back in. I took them out for Amulet just to test that. I think I might put it back in. And then the Scourge Rager, of course. So it's like a few specific Death Rattles to focus on damage, and then other stuff that's just really efficient to animate dead. Still have our good friend Void Touched Attendant, which is fantastic with the 5-mana AoE, I've got to say, since that is 2 separate instances. So there have been times where I've had the toolkit in play, and I do the Shadow Word Undeath plus Void Touch Attendant on 6, and it does basically 8 damage to their face, in addition to clearing the board. So it's felt pretty nice, and the toolkit is just insane, of course, against Imp Warlock. So yeah, been enjoying that, and it's been going pretty well for me.
Sounds fun. These two decks, I think, their existence. I really like how Undead feels like a distinct tribe, and it's very consistent between Constructed and BGs.
Yeah.
This shambling horde that's impossible to get rid of, you can kind of get under them, especially in the 3-drop deck, which people are trying all sorts of builds of it. That deck just feels like I'm not going to get there quickly, but I'm going to get there, and it's your job to stop me eventually. And Unholy DK really feels the same way. You can win some really, really long games, but also your board presence can be very powerful very quickly. So it feels the most thematically consistent of any tribe I can think of between Standard, Constructed, and Battlegrounds. Like, they really feel very similar in terms of how they operate, so I enjoy that consistency and just generally how they feel. It does feel like a distinct different way to play that I think we were waiting on for a while for this expansion to realize, and kind of feels like we've gotten there. This format is very minion-centric, very aggressive, all things considered. A lot of the from-hand damage stuff has been pulled back pretty hard, and I think it probably makes the format better. I don't know if there are a ton of, really, really exciting new flashy archetypes. There are a couple, and we're going to talk about Unholy DK and Dexplanation today, but there is a pretty wide variety of things you can do. I think every class has something to do. Even though Warrior players, I hear you, I know. We want Control to be better, and Rage is still the way to go. I hear you. I promise. But
Yeah. I mean, Mage still does a fair amount of the from hand damage with the aggro mage at least.
But it's not. That's not a combo kill. That's like the frozen touch over how many turns.
Coming, yeah. I mean, I guess the only potential complaint you could have is that there are a number of Nathria decks that are just like untouched or pretty close to untouched. Like Curse Imp Warlock is just it's the same deck we were playing 3 months ago. Like Big Spell Mage just like threw in Arcane Defenders, and that's pretty much it. And that was, when we were playing that deck before anyway. So there are some of these decks that are just the same and they're fine, and they but also everything that was super broken took a step back, so it makes sense that those are going to be kind of in the conversation all of a sudden all over again.
Yeah, I mean, this is the challenge of the 6-set meta. When you release the 3rd set every year, do you invalidate the previous 2 sets and then give yourself a big problem to solve as soon as rotation comes? Or do you allow previous things to be on par with current things and add a little, but allow for previous strategies to remain relevant at the risk of novelty? And it's a very hard problem to solve because you have to thread a pretty narrow needle, and you don't really want the old decks to go away, but as of right now, a lot of the best decks are Nathria heavy. At least, thankfully, not a lot of Denathrii, Dennies, and Rennies. A lot fewer of those, so there is a different texture. Dennies, Rennies, and Theos. And Astalor has been made notably worse. I know people were talking about how maybe he wasn't hit that hard, and he's still a fine card, but it's fine. I don't see it in 70% of my games anymore, so I don't know. I'm relatively happy with where the format is right now, and we probably won't have this very long. My amateur patch chart indicates that we should get the mini set around February 14th. So we typically have this format for about 2.5 weeks. So I would guess that we've got another week and a half left-ish, 12 days. So enjoy it while you can if you like it, and if you don't, change is probably around the corner. We should get announcements. Remember that mini sets tend to have a very, very brief reveal to patch period, 5 to 7 days. So I would guess we hear about this either next Tuesday or next Thursday, and they do 4 reveals usually. They do the neutrals, and then they do class by class. Now, it used to be by rarity, but now just 4 different days of sequential reveals. I hope they start with the neutrals because that means we can build decks as soon as we see cards. And then after that, they will do a few different classes per day. So they should actually have, if they do neutrals in 2 classes, they can do 3, 3, 3, and 3. That would make a lot of sense. And then we get the patch. We'll see. None of this is official. None of this has been announced. None of this has been confirmed anywhere. But that is my current projection. And
there was a tweet from Zeddy basically saying that the last 2 mini sets all announced the day after the Heroic Brawl ended, and then launched the following Tuesday. So that would put us an announcement on Thursday, and then launch on Valentine's Day.
Yeah, and those reveals are usually done by the social, like the Hearthstone social account, as opposed to by creators. Like, I don't know what the plans are this time, but usually that's done by, like, it's scheduled on the Hearthstone Twitter account, so you don't need someone working all weekend. You just throw them live, and then you just go with it. So it could very well be Thursday announce, drop cards, next day drop cards, next day drop cards, next day drop cards, next day drop patch. Nice brief reveal season. So seems likely, seems plausible. But as for me, well, I just got back from a work conference that took 72 solid hours of not really being able to queue much. I did keep my 11X, and I was waiting for the patch, but I just didn't really have much time to play after it came out. So I've been jumping on ladder, and I've been playing a lot of stuff. Really like Unholy and Frost DK right now. Spellfell Rel DH still pretty fun. I know people are experimenting a little bit with that. I hit my turn 1 Sigil of Alacrity yesterday. It hit a Relic of Dimensions, and it had Vault on 2, Phantasms on 3, Warband on 4, Dimensions on 5. Won that game, got there, we did it. I played a little bit. John Bray posted a super bait druid list. I won 1 game with it and then deleted it, but I got what I wanted out of it.
I mean, you knew what you were getting when you loaded that into the client, right? Like, that was that's kind of like you play that 1 game, you get 100% win rate, and you get out. Like, that's what you do with John Bray decks that other people haven't also been saying are good.
Yeah, and I don't think it's good, but I won a game with it, so, like, whatever. Pure Paladin, I maintain this is maybe my favorite iteration of Pure Paladin that I've seen and that I played in a while. Really fun, really interesting. You get to draw cards, you get to do self-damage, you get to make big buffs. Liadrin is good, Katori Lightblade is finally good. Really interesting and fun. I've been really enjoying...
Are you a Blood Crusader gamer, or are you a non-Blood Crusader gamer?
Been doing both. Been trying out a little bit of both. I think right now I'm actually non-Crusader, but it's close. It's really, really close. But I think I don't want to be quite as dependent on needing to order in the court. And actually, the main reason I like the non-Crusader list is that you cut Stonehearth Vindicator, so you don't have to worry about that roll on turn 3 determining your game plan for the rest of the game. So yeah, I've been enjoying that a lot. I got a Grandmaster Ramath off of an invitation, so I got 6 invitations instead of 3, which is better. That sort of thing is fun. Miracle Rogue still good, still solid. I won today as Heroes Irella, as a Miracle Rogue. The Battlecry gave my opponent a coin and did nothing else, but I killed with the hero power, so whatever.
8 mana next turn, I have a Mind Blast.
Correct. Well, no, 5 mana. It's 8 mana. Come on, buddy.
Oh, I'm right. Of course.
I'm not paying full price for that. I went Brawl, Zyrella, Cutlass, go.
Of course.
It was a good turn. What do you want? What do you want from me? I don't know. Formats like, I don't know if I'd say that every deck is necessarily interesting or novel, but I feel like there's a pretty wide variety of opponents out there. And that's good, because we don't have a lot of news to discuss this week. Thankfully, actually. It's been kind of a rocket ride of, like, really heavy crap dropping, and then us spending the entire show having some eulogy for something. None of that this week. The only thing that's dead is the deck that we're featuring, which is kind of the point, Unholy DK. And it's back from the dead. So we'll be covering the strategy.
It's undead, so we'll have an eulogy. Which is
a
happy time, I guess? I don't know.
I've never been to one. Anyways, let's cover the news briefly here. And then we actually do have a piece of tournament news. We really do. And then we'll just talk about Unholy DK for a while. Let's go.
Gadgets and Gazette always gets the scoop.
So, we have pretty new skins. Of course, there's a Tyrande skin, so Steve put this as item 1 in the notes.
Yes.
Tyrande and Lunara, Lunar New Year, and the Dream Grove. I mean, they're pretty. Look at these skins. They're pretty. They're very, very colorful animated portrait. Champion Tyrande for Lunar New Year, and Dream Grove Lunara. They're both 1,000 runestones, should roughly translate to $10 US or the equivalent in your country. And this is one of the bigger news items this week. So you can tell things are a little more chill. It's all right. I don't mind. But in addition, the creator program, as discussed last week and extensively, well, last night I had the opportunity, luckily, to interview and have a Q&A with Alkali from the community team. And we went through all of the questions that anybody had. We had questions from people on Twitter, people that filled out a form, sent us in anonymous questions, and just went over everything that people maybe were concerned about, were not sure about. There were some live changes the program announced on the air, including alterations to a portion of the legal document. The non-disparagement clause was reworked. The viewer requirements for Twitch were dropped from 200 to 150. That was announced, like, she told me that day, and I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. She's like, yeah, we're just going to announce it in your show. All right. Thanks, Alkali. So, Steve, you were there, and Edel, I know you've listened back to it. I'm mildly impartial because I ran the episode, but I want you both to just speak to what you think you got out of listening back to this and hearing what was going on. Edel, why don't you start?
Sure. So I listened to it a total of twice. And I think my biggest takeaway is that we have a tendency to remain in our own sort of biome, and that involves the creators we're used to seeing and the size of those creators relative to ourselves. So I think a lot of people perceive themselves as small creators because they see folks like the next level or two up and perceive them, I mean, they are larger, right? But there's a big difference between someone who's like just starting out and doesn't have a lot of lead in, right? A lot of history to go back to, where it feels bad looking at some of the creator program minimums or guidelines, because you're like, wow, that's so far away. I mean, even for me, who I'm fortunate enough to be on one of the larger podcasts, like my streams are usually not particularly large, 20s, 30s if I'm lucky. But for someone who maybe has been creating some consistent content, but hasn't been as fortunate as they have even less than that, right? So the perception of what is small streamer is different all around. And something that I totally hadn't thought about, right, was that these requirements look pretty big, but yeah, I don't check out other language streams. And there are all kinds of people who create content in other languages that are pretty good size. And I have no idea, right? I'm not looking for Russian content. I'm not looking for even Spanish content. And I could consume some of that, but it's very easy to look at our own little bubbles and say like, yeah, I'm the small creator, help me. But like, we have had so many people get stuff that previously had not been getting stuff, that you look at them and you're like, oh, but they're already successful. But they were working on that for a long time. Raren, it was insane to watch his rise, and he got his first reveal. I think The Angry Chicken got its first reveal in the past year as well.
I think so, whenever Rune of the Archmage came out.
Right. And we got our first reveal when we were able to land a game director interview for our episode 300, right? We never had a reveal before on the show, or since. And so they've definitely been spreading the love more with smaller creators that some of us may still look larger to the next level down. So it was an interesting shift of perspective, or sort of viewing all the various perspectives.
Yeah. And it was pretty clear that, I mean, first of all, it comes out how much Alkali cares, right? Like,
oh yeah,
that comes out really clearly in the interview. I mean, and that she's thought about, not that we would doubt that, but that she's thought about a lot of this stuff, like a lot, and that there's a reason this took a while to come together. And the one thing that kind of stood out to me that she said a few times, that she was careful to say, was like, we're not your stream coach, right? Like, this is something that is aspirational, and when you think about it, it's kind of like qualifying for a Masters tour in the when that was a thing that we did through qualifiers, right? Like that was something that you kind of had to work hard and put in a lot of time to do that, right? And sometimes somebody who was very good and came out of nowhere would just get there and spike, and sometimes it would take a lot, a lot of grinding to do that. And it's kind of the same thing with the creator program. She did make sure to, to clarify that this is a first phase, right? That's something that was a big concern with like the Asia Pacific creators that aren't in the program yet. That's going to be coming in a future phase, but they just don't have the community managers over there yet. And that, there's going to be something there to help people meet their goal, not so much to help people meet their goals, but also to, support smaller streamers and, kind of foster the next generation, which you have to do too. But I understand people being disappointed because it's the numbers are high in the same way that, the requirements to qualify for a Masters tour are high, right? It's the numbers are, I mean, you only need 75 CCV to get to partner, like average over a period of time, to get the Twitch partner. We talked about that last week. And 150 is a lot, but it's something that's done. And, sometimes that means that, you have to make that a priority, and it depends on where you are, right? Like if that's something that you want to do, that could be motivation. Or, I mean, I'm sure there are going to be some people that are demotivated by this, right? Like that's going to happen. But I think that at least like knowing where you need to be is at least, gives you peace if you're on the bubble and trying to make that decision of what you're going to do next.
Yeah. It's important to know what working means. Like, is what I'm doing working? Is it better to have believed that you were close when you weren't, or to know that you're not? It's a tough question. I don't know if either one of those is really great, but generally speaking, I personally would lean more into transparency than ambiguity, and much more about you must be this tall to ride, as opposed to whose hand do I shake, what message do I send. And this also allows for the creation of consistency. And I think it was particularly interesting to me how Alkali said, we're kind of giving people a clean slate here as well, because in the past, some hands weren't available to shake for people that maybe their conduct was a little bit misaligned with what the community team was looking for at the time. And as of right now, it seems like if you hit the metrics, you're probably going to get in. And she called it the kick yourself out policy. If you want to be critical, if you like, it's fine. But if you want to be destructive, that probably isn't going to last. And that's going to be up to you, not up to them. So I think that'll be a pretty interesting paradigm. Because there are some creators I can think of that maybe built their platforms off of being a little bit more on the deconstruction side than the construction side. And it will be fascinating to see what the future looks like for those folks, some of which have already made some changes and some of which have already stuck to their guns.
For me personally, I have a problem with motivation. I know it, and I get very focused on the thing in front of me. So since I've been taking care of my nephew, or today I did a labor swap with my mom where I went and painted her place while she took care of my nephew. I focus on the job in front of me, and then I come home and I'm like, I'm tired from a full day of work. Do I really want to stream? Well, today I was like, hey, if I finish this painting quickly, I can go back and I can stream the Heroic Brawliseum. And I don't know if I would have pushed to make sure I got to do that without something tangible to shoot for. So I really appreciate having the knowledge of, the existence of a program with numbers and stuff. And I'm at least partway in already, I think. Like, again, not officially, but I have been invited to some things. And it just helps to have that goal, at least for me, even if it is a distant goal. I'm a long ways away from 150 concurrent viewers, but without the knowledge of what to shoot for, it's just that much harder to hit go live. So
Yeah, and I mean, like, the numbers that they're asking for are kind of, leading you towards doing this some semi full time, and that's a decision that people need to make too, right? Like, I have a demanding full time job. I do this podcast, and then I stream twice a week most of the time. There are some days that I'm just so tired that I can't do it, right? Like that, and it's not that not that I don't want to. It's just like I know when I get to that point that I'm going to get tilted, and it's not going to be fun for anybody, right? And then so like but the thing is that I do make a point to do that consistently as much as I can, right? But that's also like, if I really wanted to like build a brand for myself, I would start a YouTube channel, right? And I do something there. And I've thought about it. Like, I even got as far as like downloading DaVinci Resolve one day and like going through one of the tutorials, and it's like, I could do that, and I may at some point, but it's also like, that's a lot of additional work when I'm already split in a lot of different ways. And it's like, well, what's the return on that going to be? Now, if I decided that that was something I needed to do, I would do it. But it's also like, that's a lot easier when when you're making this your full-time job. But that also means that if that's a direction that you're looking to go down, or making streaming more of a like a second, like a side hustle as opposed to a hobby, then that could push you in that direction.
Yeah, and at this point, we're just podcasting about podcast. So I strongly recommend just going to check out what she said directly, so we don't paraphrase anything inaccurately. But some other high-level notes, I think it's really important to mention that APAC was specifically talked about at length, and other regions of the world, that really it's a question of aligning resources and doing it right. But top of mind priority was the phrase that was used. So I don't believe that is excluded for any kind of legal reason or whatever. Just about making sure this rolls out the right way in the right places. So go check out that episode over there on my other show, one of my other shows, over at theangrychicken.com. Check that out. We've got it on our YouTube. We've got it on Twitch. We've got it on the feeds. A lot of good information there directly from Alkali. So check it out.
Recommend the
very good
VOD
interview.
for some behind the scenes setup
Yeah.
and
What happened? What did I do?
nothing unusual. It's just funny to always see the like lead up and out of a podcast, I feel like.
It's inside baseball.
Yeah.
So that's all the news that we really have this week, except for one piece of tournament news.
It's the Grand Tournament!
So we got one small tidbit from Hearthstone Esports, who tweeted yesterday afternoon that they said, after listening to feedback from the Masters Tour, we are changing prize pool distribution. Each Masters Tour will have a $50,000 prize pool similar to the 3 Lobby Legends Championships. That means that the adjusted 2023 World Championship will have an adjusted pool of $350,000. So they're taking some of the money out of the prize pool for Worlds, and they're moving it earlier into the Masters Tours so that those players have something to play for in the Masters Tour other than just qualification for Worlds, which, depending on, I don't think they said what the distribution of those prize pools is going to be, but presumably it'll be weighted. It's always going to be weighted more towards, towards the finalists. But it's not clear if there's going to be, for like the bottom 8, is there going to be anything that they get just for qualifying, or is it going to be that you need to make it to top 8 to get into the money or what have you? But presumably with the $500,000 prize pool, they were going to have some sort of a minimum payout for anyone who qualified. And so this is just kind of giving those players that payout a little bit earlier, because certainly the top 4 who are going to qualify are going to get, the lion's share of that prize pool. So it's good both to provide some additional incentive and also just kind of, spread some of that payout a little bit, right? Because having to wait until the entire end of the year for that work that you're doing is, it feels good to get to Worlds, I'm sure, but it doesn't feel good not having, the money to show for it.
I mean, or to get like third, right?
Yeah.
I mean, imagine making it to an MT, not qualifying for Worlds, and getting 0. That was one of the biggest deterrents, I think.
Yeah.
It's this makes the tournaments have something. It makes people play differently. It makes people talk about it differently. The memes about, oh, I'm running a tournament for 2 packs to the winner. That's a bigger payout than the Masters Tour. Those memes are gone, and it is worth noting this is not more money in the system. They just moved money around. So Worlds has a smaller payout, and instead the Masters Tour each got 50 grand. So instead of 500K, it's 350. So this isn't a bigger investment. It is just a reorganization that makes sense. It's also worth noting this was announced on February 1st. Some people said, well, why didn't you announce this before the month was over? But I think it is actually a very good thing that they announced at the very beginning of the next month, because you don't want to change the stakes of a ladder after people might be done competing in it. And if you announce this 2 days before the end of the season, people feel really, really pressured to dive in, as opposed to everyone having equal opportunity and information throughout the entire month. I understand it would have been nice to know this January 1st. That would have been great. But if you can't do that, don't change the stakes in the middle of the tournament in a way that has the potential for uneven engagement.
Yeah. Like, the best time to do this was a month ago. The second best time is now. Right.
Yes.
Like,
well, yesterday.
And I guess,
but yes.
Yeah, or yesterday. Yeah. But and I guess the other thing is also putting a prize pool on the Masters Tours means that there will actually be some stakes in the top 4, right? Because before that, all the top 4 were qualifying. We've seen this before when they've had these systems where, like, the semifinals and finals of those tournaments were basically like week 17 of the NFL when both teams have already gotten to playoffs, right? Like they're not nearly as playing for as much as when they're playing for like the top, to get from the top 8 to top 4. So having something on the line, even if it's not nearly as much as getting to Worlds, just having some sort of additional incentive is good for the watchability of the end of those tournaments and not have it be anticlimactic.
For sure. One additional note that I feel like is relevant to tournaments that was part of the tax thing, listen to that, but they're gonna give people codes for tournament creation, which means you might be able to see at least some third-party tournaments for codes.
Yeah.
And like, no, it's not as cool as prize pool, but I think that's still fun, right? Gives people incentive to start some grassroots stuff or keep some going. And I think is a very good use of something that's very similar to the situation of all the players who got packs from grinding open cups, right? Those players are not getting any of those packs from grinding open cups anymore because they don't exist. And that was a lot of money given away in prizing that can now be done in the form of codes for bundles for third-party tournaments. So I see that as a pretty sweet transfer of a kind of bizarre form of monetary budget, right?
Yeah, and it's a good way for like smaller tournament organizers to get off the ground. Like, we don't really, there's a few people in the community who do that, but not a lot anymore, because a lot of them, there just wasn't a lot of support from Blizzard to do any of that stuff. And I mean, what would also go a long way is for Blizzard to be promoting those, ideally like in the client, or like in Battle.net or something like that, when there's some of these to kind of help promote them too. Because half the battle is, getting people to participate. The other half is getting people to watch, right? Mm-hmm. So being, some promotional support from that end, I think would go a long way towards getting like a healthy third party, even if it's like small stakes, right? But still a healthy third party tournament or ecosystem would be a good thing to fill the gaps between the Masters Tours and Worlds. Like, there's going to be a lot of dead air there, and we've talked this to death too. But
the Edelweiss agenda, live and well. Here we go.
What do you mean?
You've only been talking about supporting third-party tournaments since I was running them. Since there's been a third party.
since
What?
I ran the only, was it round timer Hearthstone tournament?
Yes.
Listen, I don't think it's a secret that either of us would like an opportunity to cast again. So
That is true.
so, I think that if there are third-party tournaments, it's much more likely that we will get to do that. So, that's not an unselfish thing either. I'll just say that, at least for myself. But
In a grim twist of capitalism, I kind of hope that they're like, oh, we can get Edelweiss for cheaper for the events this year.
Are you advertising the competitive nature of your rates? Is that what we're doing here?
yeah.
Look, I don't know how mine compare to the ones that have been doing it longer, but I find it hard to believe that I would be being paid the same.
Well, Blizzard, if you're in the chat, you heard her. And that's all the tournament news that we have. But something, which is better than nothing. And now, let's talk about zombies. Y'all ready to talk about... And no, not The Last of Us. Not that. We'll just talk about...
Oh.
It's episode 3, man.
Darn.
I understand. But that is another time, another place. No, let's talk about Unholy DK with our resident aggro expert, Wicked Good.
So welcome, listeners, to our Dexplanations in the Upside Down, where we have our aggro expert, Wicked Good, on Unholy DK, 50 games in a couple of days. I don't know how this happened. You were playing this, and I was playing Priest, Shadow Priest, but still. What is going on with this deck?
Cats and dogs living together. It's everything is just turned topsy-turvy, but not that kind of topsy-turvy. That would be a priest deck. That's different. But yeah, it's if you're looking for something, and I guess like I was saying before the show, right? Like I need to have kind of a win rate like this in order to stick with an aggro deck, because normally I kind of get bored of these after a little while, or I get frustrated running into control decks and then just go and decide that I'm going to do something stupid instead. But this deck it's very good, and it felt very intuitive, at least for me to play. Like it made sense to me, in a way that a lot of aggro decks really don't. The idea is,
You know
really...
why it does, Steve? Because you trade here. Because it's about trading.
I go face more often than you would expect.
When you have lethal.
Well, no. After I ran into that druid, I learned my lesson and I started going face more. But and you don't actually have to go face. You don't have to trade as much because you have enough things to protect your things. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. But it's the general concept of this deck is fairly straightforward. You are building a board, and you ideally want a board that refuses to go away. And then you just stay around and be annoying as possible with your boards, make your board sticky, and then eventually you play Grave Strength, which is a 4-mana spell that says your minions get +1 attack. If you spend 5 corpses, they get +3 attack instead. So that is actually Bloodlust. The difference between that and Bloodlust is that the attack does not go away at the end of the turn. That is a permanent buff on those minions. Now, those minions are not likely to live if your opponent... I mean, first of all, your opponent's portrait is likely to explode when you do that. But even if it doesn't, your minions are probably not going to live very much longer after that. But there are times when you can set up a 2-turn lethal where you just throw a Grave Strength on, get your opponent down to like 2, and then make them deal with it. And that's just kind of generally the idea of the deck. You're trying to look for ways to make sure that you have minions left over at the end of the turn. There's a few ways that you can do that. Sometimes it's value trading. Sometimes it's playing a minion that your opponent isn't going to be able to remove cleanly, or is going to have to do a 2-for-1 trade. Sometimes it's using things like Hawkstrider Rancher, or Verk. I always have to look at the name because I can never remember it. Vrykul Necrolite.
Oh, Vrykul.
That's a very intuitive.
Vrykul.
See, it's that is not an intuitive word at all, and I do not appreciate them making that up to confuse me. But yeah, so Hawkstrider, every time you play a minion, it gets +1/+1 and summons a 1/1 chicken when it dies. I don't know if it's actually a chicken, but it looks like one. And the Vrykul Necrolite gives another minion summon a 2/2 zombie with Rush, which is also an undead. And then you have other minions that have undead synergies. You've got Arms Dealer, which is very good at buffing your other undeads. You have Amalgam of the Deep is a card that has gotten a number of questions, just kind of like we are having a conversation in the Discord, like, why is that there? Is there not anything better that's not a 6-set card? It's like, well, the undeads are generally pretty good. And you often have something to hit. And also, it's just like a 2-mana 2/3, and there aren't a lot of better options.
A 2-mana 2/3 undead. Very important.
Yeah. That's also the thing that matters. Like, you can play other things that are not undead, but it's like, well, you could throw Astalord if you wanted to, right? But that's not undead, and it's not really, it doesn't really fit the deck anymore. But getting the undead for the Arms Dealer, for some of the other synergies, that matters, and also getting you more undead matters too. And you have access to all of the undead in Death Knight, so sometimes you get a Patchwork, right? Sometimes you get a Gnome Muncher, and those are pretty good. So
yeah.
you don't
sometimes
always
you
get
get
those,
Marrow Manipulator, which has been very, very good for me.
Yeah.
The old 6-mana Pyroblast. And
Yeah.
it's important that, like, your hero power synergy matters a lot here, because it's like Mana Feeder Panthara, where you get to hero power draw a card for 4 mana a lot. That always being active makes Amalgam a lot better. You are never out of targets.
Yeah.
Not to mention, by the way, I'm not sure we covered this, Grave Strength isn't always 4 mana Bloodlust. It is 6 mana Bloodlust and deal 4, because your
Right.
token has charge.
Yeah. So that's important when you're counting. And I think we'll get into that when we get into the turns too. But it does have charge, it does go face, and it does benefit from this. I mean, it dies at the end of the turn, so it's not permanent on that. But the only other, you also have like New Rubian Vizier, which is important for the undead synergies too, right? Like, you can hero power, trade off your 1/1, and then Vizier. That's expensive, but the more undeads you have, like, the more likely you're going to get a Vizier. And then there are a number of things that you can hit off Vizier that are incredibly, incredibly good. I made a list, and now I have to find it. Oh, here we go. So like Frost Strike, Heart Strike, Unholy Frenzy, all really good for. Unholy Frenzy is amazing, by the way. It's not in the deck because it's hard to deal with, like, drawing a card slot for that. But when you can, like, take care of a big minion, get all your minions back, and get 5 or 6 corpses, like, that's a big deal. In the right circumstance. It's not in the deck because it's not always good, but in the states, against the decks, and you kind of get a sense of when you need to take it. But that card by itself can be game changing when you pick it. And then some other.
I have a story that's about Frosty K. I play school teacher, and I got an Unholy Frenzy. Y'all ever Unholy Frenzy a Death Whisper? It was disgusting. I won that game.
It was your Death Whisper.
My Death Whisper. I sent my
that's-
Death Whisper in, and it popped, and then she came back, and
That's
we had
disgusting.
I think I played 6 Horns of Winter that game. Yeah. Very horny. What are you gonna do?
Oh, God.
So anyways,
I
yes.
bet your opinion felt like that blue pretty bad. Yeah.
All right. So, did you already say what the mulligans are here?
We haven't got. We're still talking through the deck list, but yeah.
And speaking of the deck list, I want to point out the biggest thing that looks different about this deck list from Theory Crafting deck list. Well, first of all, a bunch of the cards are better because they buffed them. But second of all,
Sure.
there is no corpse engagement basically at all. No Plagued Grain, no Tomb Guardians, no Meat Grinders, no Graveyard Shifts, no Chill Fallen Barons, none of these, no Corpse Bride, Stitch Giant,
Definitely
none of
no
this
Corpse
stuff.
Bride, yeah.
Yeah, none of this stuff where we were meant to just, like, deal with the new resource at all, outside of Grave Strength, I think, really. Because
you have Grave Strength, you have Battlefield Necromancer, which got buffed, which is a 2/3 that summons a 1/3. If spends a corpse to summon a 1/3, and then Lord Marigar, who spends all your corpses and summons a 1/1 with rush for each one, and then for everyone that doesn't fit, give +2/+2 to one of them. So those get big very, very fast because you have a lot of corpses left over.
I think it's pretty key that the deck just dropped a lot of conditionality, and in the process made sure that the cards you need to be online are online, and then got rid of all the other stuff that's, fiddling around with the new resource. You just don't have to. And that means your Marrogar is going to be so much better. Your Grave Strength's basically always going to be online. And Battlefield Necromancer, the buff to make a bunch of 1/3s, I barely consider that a corpse card. Like, yes, you need one, but if it goes off one single time, the card is crazy. And if it goes off every turn, the card is crazier. It is a big mulligan outlier. Only eclipsed by the now buffed Blightfang, I think, which is a ridiculous card.
Blightfang is also really, really strong, especially in like a mirror or against like an aggro mage or something like that. The other thing that I want to call, this is Otsuna's list that we're looking at. I incorrectly attributed it to Baby Bear, but she was playing his list earlier when I tweeted about it earlier in the week. Drops Trogs for peasants, and I know I got a couple questions about that. And the reason that because peasants, like, well, it's a 2/1, and it just dies to a rogue hero power or a mage hero power or druid or whatever. If you're playing, and the response that I had to that is it's actually fine, because if you're playing peasant on 1 and they have to coin hero power, it's done 2 things for you. One, it's wasted the coin and they spent their entire turn 1 both of the coin and having to hero power your minion. But also it's giving you a corpse, so now your Necromancer's online, right? Because like that's the other thing that you want to, when you're playing it, you want to try to get, if you have Necromancer, if you can get that down on curve with a corpse. You have Body Bagger also, right? But you don't really want to have to trade off or kill things in order to get that online. Ideally, you want to get that online cleanly, and just playing peasant, if they do that, it's a win-win. Either you get a card or you get a corpse and you play Necromancer. Either way, you win.
Yeah, and honestly, Trog has not done a lot for me. I was playing a version in the Heroic Coliseum earlier today, and it was maybe a handful of times that I got Trog activations. Now, I'm sure part of that is because my opponent was just, not playing the spells into it. But what tends to happen is, okay, so they don't play spells into it, and you defend it, and as you're defending it, you're building a big board. So by the time they maybe play spells, you're not really getting any value because you've got a bunch of taunts protecting your Trog, right? Like maybe you get one, but you're not getting multiple procs. So it was definitely more underwhelming than I anticipated.
Yeah, and by the time you can really use them, because you want to have a bunch of bodies online for Grave Strength, but it's already outlived its welcome by the time you get there, right? It's not an undead. It doesn't get bigger. It's just like a 1/2. 1/2s don't really trade all that well in the mid game anyway. Like they get you more corpses, but that's about it. But you have plenty of ways to generate corpses. You don't really need the extra bodies off the Trog in order to do that.
So let's talk Mulligan.
So Mulligans, you want stuff to do. You want 1s and 2 drops. You want pretty much all the 1 drops are fine. I'll keep Skeletal, what the hell is the name of it? Skeletal Sidekick, which is the 1-mana 1/2 that gives an undead +2 attack. Like that's the most borderline of the 1 drops, but I'd still keep it because I'd rather have a 1 drop than not have a 1 drop. But I mean, Peasant obviously is fine. Arms Dealer is really good. Arms Dealer also buffs the tokens that come off your hero power, by the way. So now all of a sudden your ghouls are doing 2 attack, or 3 if you have both of them. And those are really, Body Bagger is very good too because it just gets you a corpse right away. And then Necromancer obviously is the other thing that you're really looking for. Against other board-based decks, Plague Strike would be a decent keep with an okay hand. Blightfang is a very good keep against other decks that are going to go wide. Mage is a little bit iffy there because Mage can kind of go either way. But certainly against other Death Knights, I would keep it. And I guess Warrior's normally enraged now. I guess Warlock, I certainly keep it all the time.
We're talking about Blightfang?
That card, yeah.
I think I'm at the point of probably just always keep it.
I'm getting closer,
if it hits one thing, it's the nuts, And if it ever hits more than one thing in this very minion-centric format, then you have one of the better cards in the game. The mulligan win rate, the keep rate is on the lower side. I think people may be underestimating it. But it is by far the highest mulligan win rate in the deck by 2% over Peasant going first.
Yeah, it's very, very good. But other than that, and I guess Vizier, if you have a really good hand and you know you're going to kill something off, Vizier could be okay. I'm not generally excited about having Vizier. Hawkstrider Rancher is also another one that, with a good hand, I'll keep it, because Hawkstrider Rancher is kind of your bridge into the mid game. Because once you get that down, first of all, it's got 5 health, which is a lot. It takes effort to get rid of it, and it makes all of your minions that much better that you're playing. It doesn't do anything for summons, but everything that you play just gets that much better. Your ideal curve is going to be Hawkstrider Rancher on 3 into the Swarm Guard, Nerubian Swarm Guard on 4, because even though it's summoning the copies, but they're copies of the original, so it still gets the buffs from the Hawkstrider. So you end up with like 3 2/4s that all drop 1/1s. That's a lot of corpses on the back end of that too.
That might be a bug, by the way.
Really?
It's Hawkstrider says after, and the behavior that you were describing is a whenever. If it's an after effect, the battle cry should go off, and then the original copy that you play should get the buff. It is unclear. It has been raised to the dev's attention, but after effects are supposed to happen after battle cries and after a minion has fully resolved, which means it would only buff the center one. Arms Dealer just says summon, so it doesn't matter. But
right, yeah,
the Hawkstrider interaction could be a bug, because if it worked the same way with Arms Dealer, which says after you summon, then you would get 2 3/3s and a 2/3, right? You would buff the middle one, and then you would copy it, and then you would buff the new copies. So Hawkstrider is a little funky there. Unclear if that interaction will remain, but haven't seen any official acknowledgement that it's a bug either.
Yeah.
I always just assumed because it summoned a copy that
it didn't
it got
even
the
occur to
thing
me.
and then made a copy.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
we've
it
seen
didn't
this
even
before
trigger.
with Encumbered Pack Mule, where you'll Scavenger's Ingenuity and the copy won't be buffed, right?
Right.
Yeah. So you look at the mulligan win rates on HSR. Blightfang, 1-drop. Necromancer, 1-drop, 1-drop, 1-drop. You want ones. You want something to play early. You want Battlefield Necromancer. You want Blightfang. Plague Strike is right on the line as well. But if you're against a minion deck, you want Plague Strike because that card is nutty. In terms of cards that look overkept to me, Vrykul Necrolite. The 2/2 that when you can give something else a 2/2 to pop out when it dies. Card's really overkept because it costs 2, but it's not a good on-curve play. You want to play it reactively, not proactively as much. Same with Amalgam. We're not looking necessarily for a curve. We're looking for ones. And then our power outliers, which are Necromancer, Blightfang, Plague Strike in minion matchups. It does look like Hawkstrider Rancher is probably fine on the coin, from what I can tell. It's a little better, but actually it's a little worse.
Yeah,
It's
it's funny because I was just looking at the coin play win rates for Necrolite, and I thought it would be better on the coin because you can go 1-drop into coin Necrolite on 2. It's actually better on the play. It's like it's better than Blightfang on the play. So
Where are you looking?
it goes up to. I'm looking at. Oh, you know what? I gotta look at Legend stats, not at
I'm
No,
like,
it's
that
actually
doesn't sound right.
It's not better than Blightfang, but it does get better.
It looks like it's better
when
on the
you-
coin on my end.
No, it is. Yeah. So maybe
Regardless-
we'll just strike all of that because I was confused. But
What I have
yeah.
found is that Hawkstrider is nice for the refill. Situationally, you can run it out when you just have control of the board and you're like, okay, they never kill this because it's a 2/5 and they have nothing in play. It's great there, right? But you can't always count on that. And if you curve it into Swarm Guard, sweet, GG. But very frequently, I find it more on maybe I've already played the Swarm Guard or you've already got stuff in place to defend it. Maybe you do a refill with it where you play it and a couple of ones, something like that. And then it's just that undead thing of all right, you've got a little bit of edge, and then now it's staying there, and the longer it stays there, you're just getting more and more value out of this thing, and particularly in games where you're going to eventually be playing Marrowgar.
Oh, yeah.
It just gives you so many corpses from the birds it summons.
Yeah.
So it has felt usually most impactful in slower matchups.
Yeah. Though it's fine to just run it out on 3 sometimes,
Oh,
even
totally.
if it's
Yeah.
like if that's your best play, just do it because like that thing's gonna die. And it's gonna die, and your opponent will go to extreme lengths to make sure that it does. And so that can kind of give you a little bit of time to get yourself back on board. So if that's gonna be your best play, and it's that or like hero power, or it's that or just like play a body bagger in hero power, just play the thing. Make them trade it off because that they're still going to have to deal with it. And if they don't, well, great, that it's stuck anyway, and the world's your oyster.
Do stuff.
Yeah.
Do stuff. Love
Yes,
it.
play your cards. That's always the case with a lot of these decks, but certainly with this deck, play your cards. There are reasons you would want a hero power, like if you want a hero power to turn on a Vizier or something like that, like that's occasionally correct. There are also scenarios where it's sometimes correct to coin hero power on 1 to turn on Necromancer on 2. If your hand is otherwise pretty heavy, that can be a correct play. But generally you want to be playing cards rather than hero powering and then using, and I mean, until you get to the late game, and then you're using the hero power to push damage and build your corpse total, obviously.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, we don't have to extract maximum value. We can, but we don't have to, and it's much better to make our opponent play off balance when we keep the pressure on them.
Yeah, you just get value, right? Like you don't have to try hard to get value out of this deck. Like you should be ordering correctly to make sure that you're getting value out of it and make sure that you're not like trading off Blightfang minions that are onto a full board or something like that. But you don't have to try harder than you would normally just to get good value out of this. Like this deck it's probably the most value packed aggro deck I've ever seen. And I mean, it really is more like a token druid, but you don't have to go out of your way. Like the value you're going to get is generally going to be enough. And then, how you play from there really depends on what you're playing against. Like if you're against another board-based deck, if you're against a paladin, if you're against an aggro mage, you're against an aggro druid, you're probably going to be trading more in the mid game because you're generally trying to trade to earn the right to start going face. And if you're against a slower deck, then you're just sending all the damage face and making them deal with it a lot of the time, unless you're protecting something like a Hawkstrider or something like that. But it's amazed me like how lopsided the matchup against aggro druid feels. Like I had a game today where I posted in the Discord, like, why are we still playing this game? This is usually like, why are we still playing this game is the thing I say as a control player. But like it was like turn 5, they'd already played Pride's Fury, and then I'd already cleaned off their board, and they were top decking. And it was like 3 turns later, and they were still like drawing one card a turn and playing. It's like, what are we playing for? What is your win con? I'm at 28. I have a full board. You have 1 minion, and you have an empty hand. What are we doing here? But
So
it's like.
This is why you like it, because it's an aggro deck that beats other aggro decks.
Well, I also like it because it beats the hell out of Thief Rogue, but that's beside the point. But it's funny like how much more staying power you have, and like their minions get big, but your minions don't go away, and so you can just continue to trade off their stuff until they don't have anything else, and then once it's clear that they've run out of gas, then you start turning on your gas and going face. But that again, you have to kind of sense like, why am I trading if I'm trading? Against aggro druid, you're trading because the way you're going to win is by keeping board. Same with paladin. Like if you don't trade off everything the paladin has, they can seal a blood or 4 Quel'Thalas or whatever and get board back, and that might it's always kind of a tense thing against paladin. Against like ramp druid, just play your things and go face and ignore all their stuff. Just hit them in the face, and they'll probably be dead before they can start like Scale of Onyxia-ing or Earthen Scales or whatever. And you can probably find something like an Obliterate to deal with the taunt and get yourself through.
I will say many times if your opponent has like a kind of big thing, and it's going to cost you a lot of stuff to kill it, even if they're sort of a board-based deck like a paladin. As long as it doesn't have taunt, I think maintaining a large board is what you want to kind of give preference, especially because you've got stuff like Necromancer, Swarm Guard to just put stuff in the way. So you're not really concerned about them killing you with a big blood minion. Wait, it's called Blood
Seal,
Crusade?
Seal of Blood.
Blood Seal. Seal of Blooded minion. So if you can just say, okay, you've got a big thing. Good. You're going to kill one of my minions a turn. The rest of them are going to hit you, and you have to live in fear of Grave Strength.
Yeah, like, don't try and keep up if Evolve Shaman makes a 10-10 or whatever. Like,
Right.
put taunts in the way and hope they don't kill you. But trying to trade to keep up with Evolve Shaman nonsense, only sadness. There is only sadness here. Do not do it.
Yeah, and you're gonna have to trade through the taunts anyway, right? Like you're gonna have to trade through the Prescience taunts and the taunt totems, and like you're gonna have to do enough trading as it is. But also that's why like Vizier and School Teacher are there, right? Like you have a lot of things that you can find: obliterate, asphyxiate, frost strike, blood for the smaller things, heart strike, even, I mean, we talked through a bunch of them, but there are a lot of cheap removal spells that you can get off those that you can generate to deal with something big. There's also like getting a Sylvanas off of an Amalgam of the Deep is something that you can do against a shaman. It's like, okay, well, I just evolved my giant thing. Okay, it's mine now. Thank you. Right. And or against a Thief Rogue when they inevitably generate a Meta or a Light Shower Elemental, you can just take it. That's something that you can kind of keep a lookout for also. So you can use those generations to kind of get you through the big walls that you're otherwise going to have to spend a lot of resources trading through. And the other thing is once you get to turn 5, you're going to have to start trying to decide when you're going to draw with Famished Fool. Because it will hopefully you don't keep it in the mulligan, but once you draw it infuses pretty quickly. And in general, if you have the choice between drawing with Famished Fool or building a board that has a chance of sticking, you probably want to build the board. If you're just going to put a bunch of crap on the board that's all going to die without too much effort from your opponent, then maybe you draw. Or once you already have board control, and you don't need to spend a lot of resources developing that board anymore because you're in range of getting wiped out by a board clear or whatever, that's a good time to Famished Fool. But you don't want to just draw for the sake of drawing with Famished Fool. You really want to make sure that you don't have better things to do, and building a board should always be a priority over getting more resources.
Yeah,
Ooh.
it makes sense. Like the value you gain from having minions on the board is far more than the value of cards in hand that don't end up sticking because your opponent has built an advantage. So I'm looking here at well, first of all, Grave Strength. We should keep this in mind because you wrote one of my favorite bullet points here. I was on my way to the mattress, but I saw this. Like, always be counting. Love that. Love that we're keeping in mind. And make sure to include your hero power, which can be 4 damage, or you can use that to summon something that dies, which can then get your Grave Strength to 5 corpses. You want to make sure that card's yellow, and you want to make sure you plan for that card being yellow, so then your opponent can be dead. Very important.
Yeah, and the way that you do that, if you're not used to playing with Bloodlust, is you add up your damage on board, and then you count your minions, multiply by 3, multiply your number of your minions on board by 3, add that to your total damage. That's your output. You don't have to go and like, okay, 1 + 3 + 4 + 3, that takes too long. That's the way that you do that. What is it, like differential addition or for whatever I remember one of the esports videos had a name for it. I don't remember what the hell it is, but just add up your attack, your minions times 3, add that to your attack. That's what you're going to go face for. And the other thing is, if you do lose board, playing towards Lord Marogar is very often a way that you can bail yourself out. Marogar is in a nutty card. And I think that was one of the things when you were streaming at all. I said, like, I think there was one game where you started falling behind, like, don't worry about it, Marogar's got your back. And he did. Because
Sure enough.
those minions get really big, and there's not a lot of ways to deal with, like, damage removal is not getting rid of a 17/17. Like, it's just not. Like, it's gonna have to be like something like a Whirlpool that's going to actually deal with the board that's coming out of there. And a lot of decks just don't have that. And honestly, I think people just forget about it a lot of the time. Like they think they're dealing with the board, they think they're fine. All of a sudden, Marigar comes out. It's like, oh, yeah, that's a thing. So make sure that you keep it might even be in your hand. You might just have to play towards top decking, and that's your out. But Marigar can bail you out of bad situations.
Yeah, had a game where I was like, this isn't that many corpses, but it made a bunch of 3/3 rushers, and those were able to clear my opponent's board. I kept, one minion in play besides the Marigar itself, and that was enough with Grave Strength. So,
and if you have a board, right, the minion, you get a couple really big minions, right? So keep that in mind too. Like when you have an empty board, then it's going to fill it up and it's going to make them varying sizes. If there are times when you have like 4 minions on board and you're just going to get like a 9/7 and 2 chonkers, and that's fine too. But like generally, if you have an empty board, you're generally looking for double-digit corpses, but it doesn't have to be like an obscene amount of corpses. Like generally, like 15 is plenty to justify putting the Marigar down on board.
That's how many I had today when I played the card. They played a Krakatoa, I played a Marigar, they left. Like, that's just how it went.
I guess they were feeling crabby.
Yes. Well, not anymore.
No.
So looking at the matchup spreads here, there are a few matchups that stand out. The worst matchup for us is Frostworm's Fury. Frosty K, very, very bad for us. Like, they have a lot of board pings, but the important thing is the chain freezes. We obviously do not do well against that because we are a board-based deck, and then they say, no, that doesn't matter anymore. Does look like the Blood matchup isn't great, but, like, it's fine-ish, and you also won't see too many of them. It is unfavored, but not by a crazy amount. If I'm looking at the other matchups that aren't great for us, Evolve Shaman stands out, and Equality Control Paladin are the other two that stand out.
And Big Spell Mage. Big Spell Mage sucks.
Yes.
Because you can't really dump your spells easily. Like if you draw Grave Strength, like you can't really play it cleanly without sacrificing a lot of damage, and just they have a lot of freezes and they can just chain runes, and that's generally a bad time for you.
Yeah. That makes sense. It's
I mean, look, there was a while in that climb where like I had 4 losses and most of them were the mirror. Like it's even against like Control War, like things you would think I would be bad about, like bad against like Blood DK, Control Warrior, Quest Priest, whatever. Like they're being able to just like stick a board, because at a certain point every board becomes a threat. If you just keep building boards, eventually one of them sticks. You can get Grave Strength through a lot of the time. I mean, it doesn't always work, but a lot of the time.
Yeah. And otherwise, looking at this matchup spread, surprisingly positive overall. Favored against Miracle Rogue, slightly favored, not massively, but slightly favored against all the Hunters. Beats most of the Demon Hunters, though a little bit unfavored against Spellfell, but like not majorly, but a teeny bit. We crush every Druid there is. Potentially a little bit of a dog to good in Rage Warrior draws, just because if they get going fast and then they have Whirling Combatant, I can see that being a problem. And then otherwise relatively favored against Imp Warlocks. It's got a pretty good spread overall. I mean, the format is going to narrow a bit as the dust settles from this patch all the way until the mini set comes out. But all things considered, if I look at the meta tab here on HS Replay, if I look at the last 3 days at Legend, it is the number 4 deck overall. It's a pretty good spot to be. Diamond through Legend, it is number 6. And I think that is a far cry from where we were when we look back at before this patch, before the buffs, before other things got taken away. Boy, that Wild Pond Knoll card, that was a lot.
Oh.
That was a lot.
Yep.
Yeah. And I wouldn't be surprised if this starts getting targeted, if it gets more popular. Like it was in the meta, it was listed in the Meta Breaker section of the Vicious Syndicate report today. That's generally not good for its prospects. That'll mean that people will be gunning for it, and they'll probably. I have seen like an uptick in Big Spell Mage today, when I was playing, which is not fun at all. But ultimately, it's got enough game that even if it gets targeted, sometimes it requires very specific answers, and your opponent actually has to draw them. And sometimes you can just kind of get there with a big board anyway.
Yeah. Well, any closing thoughts? Any final words?
I don't know what's happened to me.
You won. You're winning. That's what happened to you.
Is this winning though? Is it?
Yes. Yes, it is.
But at what cost? What cost?
Depends how many corpses you have. Usually about 5.
Well, that's fair. That's fair.
All right. Well, no drama this week. Just Hearthstone. I think we're gonna wrap it up. I think we're gonna a nice svelte episode for once over the past couple weeks. We have many folks we'd like to thank for this aggro-sized episode. Nice and quick, to the point, love it. Check out our thanks section on the website, coinconcede.com. You can find our contact info, show notes, Patreon information. You can monetarily support our show over at patreon.com/coinconcede. Join us every week live by following us on Twitch at twitch.coinconcede.com. Community chats in our Discord at discord.coinconcede.com. Right into our email at coinconcede@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter at coinconcede. Like, share, and follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/coinconcede. CC Swag, heading over to our shop at shop.coinconcede.com. Big thanks to our producers, Number 3, Doshi K, Kresh, Cap, Beef Squatch, David P, Faded Black, Wild Lou, Jeremy T, Bottle Caps, Lucky, Grumpy Monk, Creb Mart, The Burger Club. D. Finberg, thank you so much for the Twitch sub. And I'm going to Coin Concede. Alkali, thanks so much for coming on. The Angry Chicken, thanks so much for helping give the community some clarity and communication. Much appreciated. I can't believe that your DMs are still open. I don't know how you live that life, but big props. Edel, you got anyone?
Yeah, I'm going to coin concede this week to everyone that I did coachings for in the last week. It's been kind of nuts since the patch came out because most people wanted to wait until then. So last few days I've kind of had 2 to 3 a day for a little bit. So thank you for understanding when I'm like a little late because I was getting done the person right before you or any of that kind of stuff. And extra coin concede / I'm sorry to Tito Santana because I am a pedant and he will know. He will understand.
This sounds extremely plausible.
Look, I once corrected my board game design professor on a grammar thing because I couldn't stop myself. And he was like, did you just... All right, we're going to move on.
Sounds about right. Steve, coin concedes?
I'm gonna coin concede to Otsuna. We called him out by as the builder of that deck, but he actually, if you're trying to stay on the bleeding edge, you should follow him on Twitter. He builds a lot of decks, and they generally they sometimes get refined, but he's like, if you want to see what's going to be the next thing, you should be following him. He's been really doing a lot of deck building of meta decks over the last couple of sets, really. And he doesn't stream consistently, so he doesn't get quite as much of the acclaim as someone like a No Hands Gamer, who also does a lot of good work. But Otsuna is someone who you should keep an eye on. And I mean, he got me to like an aggro deck, so I mean, that is worthy of praise in and of itself.
Yeah, it's quite a miracle. Made Unholy DK good to the point that even you enjoy playing it.
Even a degen control player like me can pilot it.
Well, I think that's our episode. So keep calm and may your grave strength always be yellow. And if you see us on ladder, coin concede.
Coin concede.
Coin concede.
All right.
Oh, man. This is actually
120. You get like half your weekend back.
Amazing. Yeah. Amazing. Yeah, I like that we just didn't have any horrible shit to cover.
I know.
Thank you, Blizzard. Coin concede to Blizzard for not having any horrible shit for us to cover. Well, everyone in chat, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate you. And we'll see y'all next week.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.